So I'm going to call to order this meeting of the City of Davis Climate and Environmental Justice Commission. Thank you everybody for joining us this evening. Let's go ahead and do a roll call for commissioners that are present, and I'll start to my left. Commissioner Kramer. Jim. We're getting going. You need the... Jim, can you hear us?
I can hear it.
Awesome. All right, we're going to do the roll call. I'm going to start with you.
I'm here.
There we go.
Present. Present.
Present.
All right, so I'll note for the record we have all commissioners with the exception of Commissioner Byrne. And we will go to approve the agenda. So do we have any adjustments to today's agenda from the group here?
I make a motion that we accept the agenda as presented.
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously to approve the agenda. All right, so we will move on to brief announcements from staff, commissioners, and council liaisons. Let's go ahead and start with commissioners this evening. Any brief announcements from commissioners? All righty, and it looks like we do not have a council liaison today. So I will turn it over to staff for any brief announcements.
None at this time.
All right, thank you, Sam. In that case, we will move on to public comment. So as a reminder for the folks in attendance here, this is public comment for items that are not on our agenda. We'll have a public comment opportunity for agendized items as those items come up for consideration tonight. So public comment for non-agendized items. All right, seeing none, and I see that Commissioner Byrne is joining us, so I'll let him take a minute to get up here. Sorry, folks. No worries. All right, so adjustment to the roll call. We do have Commissioner Byrne this evening. Jacob, good to see you. And we have just gotten through our non-agendized public comment. So in that case, we can go to the consent calendar. This evening we have just the commission minutes from January, I believe, if I'm correct, as consent items. Do we have any adjustments or comments on those minutes? All right.
I make a motion to approve minutes.
Second. I'll call that for consent calendar. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries unanimously. All right, and so we will move on to our regular agenda items, and we'll start with the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan annual update from staff. So we will go for, if I'm remembering my order of operations here correctly, presentation from staff followed by public comment and clarifying questions.
All right, thanks, Jordan. Okay, I'll go ahead and get started then with the update. So this will be the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan Implementation Report and Update for 2025, as well as a few opportunities for 2026 listed at the end there. And I'm Sam Blacklock, the Climate Action Resilience Program Manager here with the City of Davis. So just start with a quick background for everybody here. The CAP was adopted on April 18th, 2023. It provides strategies for how the city is going to address climate change, how to collaborate with residents, businesses, and regional partners. So we're kind of looking at a multifaceted approach here that's going to go across 5 larger goal areas: building, energy, and design, transportation, land use, water conservation, waste reduction, and so on and so forth there. And the way that's been organized is into 28 prioritized actions across those 5 goal areas, as well as some additional actions that were identified during public comment, but not prioritized within the document itself as well there. And so the way that this update is going to be focused is mostly on looking back at 2025 specifically, and so trying to share some activities and highlights within those goal areas for that, as well as updates on regional partnerships and then kind of looking ahead and see what opportunity for 2026 there are, and we'll kind of go through those line by line there. So start with building energy and design for this. So there's 8 priority actions identified within there across 2 more kind of sub-goal areas. And so just going to run you through kind of what was in the staff report there and kind of give you a little bit more detail and context on those different updates. So starting with the home energy score pilot. So this was an opportunity that we had to work with Yolo County and Cool Davis to be able to do a home energy score pilot within the city. So this is something that's been happening regionally. An organization called BayREN has been doing this for a while in the Bay Area, and they've been essentially doing assessments for homeowners that give a 1 to 10 score, with 10 being most efficient, 1 being least efficient. And then another outcome of this report is that it provides kind of actionable recommendations you can take to improve the score on your home. And so that's something that we've seen successful with BayREN, and so we were able to pilot it here. So Yolo County was doing 50 initially in the unincorporated areas, and then spreading out to some other jurisdictions based on trying to increase demand for it. We had high demand for it in Davis, so we had over 100 applications for it to fill 50 slots, so it really was something that there is high interest for, which was really great. Cool Davis was a great partner with this, so we were able to do a lot of outreach and kind of spread the word on it, and then look for opportunities to work with those homeowners for those scores with the local assessor. One interesting thing about this is that the state is planning to roll out a statewide home energy score program at some point this year. We don't have an exact date, but this is kind of a good way to drum up interest for it, see who's kind of already interested and who didn't get selected. So we have a list of people that we can reach out to with more information, and also look at promotion channels for the statewide program as well once we hit that level. So that one I think most aligns with BE2 action items. That was really focusing on kind of the building electrification, energy efficiency within existing buildings. Was one of the ways that we were looking at it. Another project I think has been interesting here at the city in the past year is the LED lighting upgrades that are being performed. So this is being done with a company called EcoGreen, who basically performs building audits and then has the case laid out for what improvements could be made to be able to lower energy costs for those facilities. And so in 2025, it was the Civic Center, Police Department, Manor Pool, Royal Pool, and the different parks there listed, resulting in 443,000 kilowatt hour savings, or 100,000 kilowatt hour savings there. So it's actually a pretty substantial savings that you could accumulate there, and we were able to do this in 2024 as well, so we're going to build on previous work with them. And I think this is another opportunity to explore working with energy services companies more as they perform a lot of these building audits and come up with recommendations that you can use. And a lot of it's performed in a way where you can kind of see what you're saving to be upfront before you commit to actually performing the project. So it's a pretty interesting opportunity there. Diving in further here on some other things. So trying to get our heads around tracking methods for building permit data. So one thing that I think we can explore more this year as well is trying to figure out how to look at this in more detail and try to kind of build upon this. I put a year here of 2025 of 150 total permits for gas to electric conversions spread across HVAC, fireplaces, ranges, water heaters, and combo, meaning more than 2 things were performed with the permit. And so, or more than 1 thing was performed with the permit. And so I think that this is something, I was able to get some extra data from our building team today that essentially showed 2024's data was around 86 of these conversions happening. And so then we were able to have about a 75% increase. Kind of the next step will be figuring out, total permits issued, trying to understand what percent of these are for electric conversions, and then being able to understand more holistically across maybe the community where are we in terms of meeting those voluntary benchmarks that we set within the CAP. Another item listed there is the adoption of the 2025 California Standards Building Code. I want to highlight this one. I know it's not specifically called out as an action within the CAP, but I just wanted to show that we were going with the Tier 1 Cal Green on here, so it was kind of above the minimum standards there, and usually that's kind of related more to a whole bunch of different areas. Actually, it could be higher EV charging spaces that are allowed for it, heat island effect mitigation, but also greater energy efficiency in buildings is another component of it, so it has kind of a wider range there. And then one other one that we're kind of just getting into the works with UC Davis, we actually just are working on the agreement today and this week, is working on a community virtual power plant grant. So this is in collaboration with the Western Cooling Efficiency Center from UC Davis, and the idea behind it is smart thermostat technology. So for that one, we're looking at how can we use, kind of plug in all of our different systems across the city here so that it helps kind of with the load bearing of all the different things. You can kind of spread out the energy usage a bit better with it, is my understanding, and We're going to be getting into the project more here soon. We're still at the agreement phase, but that is something that was funded, I think, through the CEC. So we're working with them on that. And that should be, it's not directly called out by the CAP as one of the action items, but it's identified as an additional action focused on city facilities as model. So this could be an interesting pilot project to kind of explore opportunities there with community virtual power plants. So we'll be moving on to a different goal area here, transportation and land use. So this one has the most action items out of the CAP, spread across about 5 different sub-goal areas there, as you can see on the left-hand side. So looking at city fleet electrification, so that second kind of prioritized action within transportation and land use. So in the past year, we've been focusing on kind of building off of a fleet transition plan. And one specific component of it is trying to figure out what vehicles we can start to switch over to electric. Right now, at this current state, we have 7 light-duty electric trucks that have been purchased, so we were able to do some grant funding. With that, I believe it came from SACOG to help purchase those trucks, and we're additionally trying to acquire 3 more as well. As part of that too is getting the charging infrastructure in place at the public works yard to be able to support those new vehicles. And so that is something we're working with the PG&E grants for a lot of the outside the meter kind of infrastructure, and then the design firm to be able to do further charging infrastructure inside the yards. And so that is something there's more to come on, but that's something we're trying to test out now and get more vehicles switched over as we're able to. Another larger project is Electrify YOLO. And so this one has been done with multiple jurisdictions around, and we had a large kind of chunk of the funding to be able to put into this project. Specifically, right now, the state that we're at for that is that there's an RFP being developed for setting up these publicly accessible EV chargers across 5 locations. And I believe, I think we have the final list. I can work on getting that information, but it's kind of spread out within access to I-80, I think was one of the original intents of it, and being able to access it from there. And so I think there's some downtown at the Amtrak station, and kind of that's the intended locations. But like I said, the RFP is being developed now, so they aren't installed at this time. But that would be the next step, is getting that out so that we can actually begin to build those. And one interesting action plan that I think ties into Electrify YOLO in a way is the Zero Emission Vehicle Action Plan. So this is something that's being done in conjunction with Yolo County and neighboring jurisdictions, and a consultant, and trying to figure out what is kind of a larger strategy for zero emission vehicles, both from a community needs perspective and also charging infrastructure, what other mobility needs are there, and kind of community needs associated with this. I think one thing that can come out of this that can help with Electrify YOLO is that we'll be able to identify additional locations where there is community need for charging stations and other types of infrastructure. And any remaining funds from Electrify YOLO projects, after that RFP is issued and those initial sites are set up, we can then use towards implementing additional sites, the findings from the Zero Emission Vehicle Action Plan. Current status of that was there's a community-wide survey that was recently completed, very promoted via Greener Davis, and we'll see kind of what the next results are with that. The consultant's currently going through that. All right. The transportation team has a lot of plans that they're currently working on implementing. So one of the large ones, and kind of in the staff report, I listed out a bunch of the individual items within it, is the Moving Transportation Forward Plan. So this was completed last year, and it's essentially a large roadmap that's showing all the different initiatives that are going on within the transportation team. And kind of specifically, we're looking at, sorry, just looking for my notes here on it. So just some examples of projects that are within that one is there's like the Cowell Boulevard Complete Streets. There's a lot of bike safety programs that fall under this larger plan. There's bike parking ordinance, for example, for planning for scooters and e-bikes and things like that. There's market crosswalk evaluation, so all those community requests that come in, trying to find ways that those can be implemented. So it's kind of it's a wide-ranging plan, but it really provides a helpful kind of roadmap to be able to show what all the different initiatives, what status are they in, and I think it's a useful document and really helps align some of the CAP transportation items with what the transportation team is putting into action in terms of projects. Underneath that is the active transportation plan. So that was something that was called out in it, but it's a separate plan that was funded via grant in July 2025. So that is something that our active transportation coordinator is working on. It's currently in development with the plan being to update the 2014 bicycle action plan. So this is more to come on this one, but that is something that I think is kind of in that development stage right now, where I'm sure we'll be seeking community input throughout various stages in the coming year as well. on it. Also, another plan that has a lot of relevance is the short-range transit plan. So this is another one that had a recent survey that was closed, and it's really focusing on opportunities to extend service times and routes, trying to reduce delays and encourage ridership. So this one, I think, will really tie in most to TR 6 and 7 there, under the goals of expanding public transit and strengthening regional transit, and I think that's a good opportunity to be able to assess the needs and work more regionally with our partners there. Oh, and just as a statistic there that I think is interesting, this is the bike counter at 3rd and University. So one thing I think that is interesting about this and helps provide some relevance is that you can notice there's some big spikes in the spring and fall, which makes sense. May is Bike Month is kind of one thing that we like to focus on as well as a promotional opportunity, and so you see there's high ridership in May, and I think that could be a good tie-in with some of our other programs like YOLO Commute, is kind of a TDM, Transportation Demand Management Organization, and they do a lot of May is Bike Month promotions, so there's a lot of people biking. I think there's a good time for incentives to be utilized by partner organizations with that, whether that's a bike tune-up, being able to buy an e-bike, things like that. So I think this kind of just shows like May is a good time to be able to try to get people out on bikes, and so I think it's just an interesting opportunity there. Speaking of YOLO Commute, this is a non-profit partnership, so it's an interesting one because it's both public and private employers, and I think one opportunity and kind of some things that have happened is that there has been a lot of incentives for it. The number of organizations get, whether that's bike tune-ups, funds towards a new bike, things like that. But I think it could do some benefit to have increased awareness around it. And City of Davis is a member, but I think, even internally focusing, like how do we make sure new employees are aware of this? How do we make sure that we can kind of lead by example with a lot of that? And also being able to get more community organizations involved, whether those are businesses or just nonprofit partners, or kind of look at different strategies there as well. And then last under transportation and land use here is sustainable housing. So a couple large projects came to the CEJC last year, Willow Grove and Village Farms. So there was an opportunity to review the sustainability plans for both of those at this commission. And then for Village Farms, there was a follow-up after that as well to do a cap alignment review at City Council. So I think that was a valuable role of the commission, was to be able to have the input on those sustainability plans at those times and go provide their recommendations. So we're moving on to our third goal area here, which is water conservation and waste reduction. So one prioritized action here, but there are additional actions that have been called out with the CAP that were not prioritized at the time. So just putting some numbers to climate ready private landscapes. There was 31 projects last year where MWELO was applied. So that's the Model Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance. And so this is looking at how are we be able to kind of implement those climate ready private landscapes and what do those numbers actually lead up to. I think that there is opportunity to work more to understand statewide incentive programs that could become available and things like that, to be able to try to tie those in, as well as just educational materials. But that's something I think can definitely be developed further. In terms of water conservation, generally speaking too, there is AquaHawk, which is a service available to customers here. And so there are currently 9,800 customers registered for this. And basically my understanding, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong too, is that it kind of monitors the water usage for the residents, and then from there it sends out notifications if it notices something that's an anomaly. So it helps with just the consumer benefit there.
There's sort of two pieces of the notification. So what this is specifically referring to is something called courtesy notices. So every 2 weeks, the accounts that are flagged at a certain level within AquaHawk are pulled, and letters are mailed to those addresses, whether they are signed up for AquaHawk or not, so that we're able to let them know, hey, the criteria is that there's 48 hours or more of continuous water use, which is highly indicative of a potential leak. So we would let them know, hey, you might have a leak on your property, we're seeing 48 hours or more of continuous water use. This is just a courtesy notice to let you know that there might be something going on. You may know that we do bill for water use 2 months in arrears in this community, so it can take a little while. So if you have a leak in June, you're not seeing that for a few months show up in your bill. So with AquaHawk, we have this additional opportunity to send out these courtesy notices. In addition, you as the user of AquaHawk, and of course we encourage everyone to sign up for AquaHawk, have the opportunity to sign up for your own usage alerts. There aren't necessarily automatic alerts that go out through the system, but you can set up your own alerts after a certain dollar threshold or a certain water threshold, and it will let you know when they've passed those thresholds.
Thank you, Adrian. Great, and so moving on to waste reduction. So there wasn't a prioritized action there, but I wanted to highlight some public outreach that occurs just from our own conservation teams here. So one of our biggest tools is the Greener Davis newsletter. So that's something that has, I think, 16,000 email addresses associated with it. So it's a really good tool to be able to spread educational items as well as, any outreach. If there's relevant surveys, things like that. I think it's a really useful one. Just some other numbers tied to the waste reduction outreach. There were 29,000 mailers sent out to residential addresses in Davis. A lot of this is focusing on recycling and things like that. So there were 3,000 recycling calendars printed and distributed to the community. There was the monthly Greener Davis email newsletter that is sent out monthly, but there's also special editions that come out for trees in April and residential property management in June. And then, let's see here. Yeah, so we got climate adaptation as our next goal. So you can see there are 6 items kind of spread out as the priority actions within there across 3 sub-goal areas. And so looking at kind of the first one there with cool surfaces, we have a cool pavement project that we were able to install at the Public Works Courtyard. So this is something that was recently installed in the past few months, and looking at now testing plans, so kind of aiming for summer 2026 to be able to validate some of the assumptions there with that. But that is one of our pilot projects that we were able to implement. I think September of last year, you saw the parking lot shade requirement code updates come your way here, and there was a presentation about it. So this is something that also went to City Council and was passed there. So these are amendments to Chapter 40 zoning there, and so trying to enable kind of the blend of trees and solar panels across parking lot shade. I think it can have multi-benefit of, feeds into a bit of the community solar energy, but also the cool surfaces, and helps just with kind of that on-site energy generation as an option that developers can help kind of utilize there. Another big one there is that second action item, which is around the urban forest. And so in November, you saw the presentation on the update from Charlie and the forestry team there around kind of the current status of the urban forestry management plan. I think there's, a lot of information in that. I encourage everyone to take a deeper dive into that. One thing that I see as an opportunity, and we'll discuss it at the end too, is just trying to work on, if there's additional funding opportunities that arise from the state, whether that's from Prop 4 funds or things like that, that could be an interesting thing to pursue. Also, I think just with internal staff coordination, outreach can be an asset too, working with myself and Charlie's team. So I think there's a lot of work that can be kind of melded there. Not called out specifically as a prioritized action, but I wanted to highlight it. It was noted as additional action in the CAP is the aquifer storage and recovery pilot. So this is just something that's been going on at the city over the past year. It's currently in phases 2 and 3, and so this is working with the couple of city wells for some pilot testing here. I think it's being done with West Yost. I don't know if there's anything we want to add to it, but I think it's just kind of an ongoing climate adaptation project here.
I think that's good enough now. If there are any questions afterwards, I can certainly chat about it.
Sounds good. And then in terms of the funding and staffing for existing efforts, I am your new climate adaptation, climate action resilience program manager here, so excited to be here and work on this. Definitely trying to dive in as much as I can on each of these areas and kind of get as much as I can, but I know, I'm still in kind of my own onboarding phase with all these different actions, so I'm definitely open to feedback on, structure of these reports and structures of how we're approaching things like that, definitely. And also, I think there's a lot of opportunity coming up, and yeah, just excited to be here, so I think that'll be a good thing over the coming year. Last one is carbon removal, but we did not perform any specific actions related to it in the past year. This one focuses a lot on, regional efforts under that first one for carbon sequestration removal. That would be working probably more with like Yolo County or with the larger jurisdictions that has more farmland and things where you could perform carbon sequestration activities. Mentioning is there is some like city farms, like for these carbon farmlands listed under the second item. Maybe kind of a good way to approach that in the future could be through like California Department of Food and Ag's Healthy Soils programs or things that do provide funding where you could potentially implement some projects that are more to the scale of that and provide the funding source as well and working with the farmers there. So I think that there is opportunity, but we did not perform any actions to my knowledge in the past year on those. I wanted to highlight some of our Cool Data's programming. So we have an MOU that was executed in April 2024 with them, and the goal here is to support CAP implementation. So I just want to highlight kind of some of the 3 big areas there. There's the Make a Plan Home Energy Advising. So in 2025, there were 14 activities, around 600 engagements. So it's people talked with, whether they be via outreach or at the advising sessions themselves, and 22 communications sent. I think that I was able to watch one of the videos of these, and they're useful to be able to provide kind of practical feedback to homeowners of trying to perform, like, what do you actually do on the ground at your house to be able to make these updates and make these kind of recommendations. There could be a good tie into with home energy score pilot. So like I said, one of the outcomes of that is that you get this list of things you can do to your house, but it's kind of like the actual next steps are where sometimes maybe people need a little bit of assistance. So while there's a lot of good information in these outcome reports, these make a plan sessions also help kind of connect the dots of how you get from that report to kind of implementation there. Similar to Make a Plan, but focused more on transportation, is the Ride Cool campaign. So this is focusing on zero-emission vehicles adoption, focusing on active transportation, things like that. So similarly, there were 16 activities, but over 2,000 engagements reported by Cool Davis for this, 31 communications sent. And so transportation is one of our largest sectors with most action items kind of listed in our CAP. And so I think there is, anything that we can do with the outreach and education element there is helpful, and I think that's a useful tool. And then, as I mentioned earlier in this report, the home energy score pilot, there was outreach performed for this by Cool Davis, and they did a lot of the administrative support and application follow-up with all the people who applied to this program. Like I said, I have over 100 applicants, so there's high interest, and I think some of the outcomes of this will also be on the follow-ups there as we look forward to the statewide program. All right, so we have a few different local and regional partners that I want to highlight and just kind of explain some of the work that we do, kind of not just within the city, but around regionally as well. We have the Yolo County Regional Resilience Collaborative. So this is a grant-funded kind of activity that we're hoping to have jurisdictions come together. So Yolo County is the lead with the grant there, and then we have the City of Winters, ourselves, City of Woodland, City of West Sacramento, and surrounding kind of nonprofit partners as well. So Cool Davis is a member, and some other nonprofit partners as well. And one of the kind of goals of this organization is to make it easier to apply for grants, especially ones where being kind of in a regional group is going to be easier to be more competitive for the application. And so I think Yolo County found previously that could be really difficult, especially on a quick timeline to get everyone together and kind of get everything sorted. This collaborative provides a mechanism for us to be able to apply for those funds in a more cohesive manner. And so one of the activities that is currently underway is coming up with prioritized project lists that are kind of regionally representative, that we can kind of fine tune into proposals with the help of the consultant, and then have those kind of ready to go if the funding opportunities arise. So I think it's a really interesting collaborative. I think that there's high engagement from the members there, and kind of more to come over the coming year with it. Kind of more of an information exchange across the climate action teams is the City County Climate Working Group. So this is Yolo County and the jurisdictions, and then Sacramento County and the jurisdictions within there too. And it's an information sharing monthly meeting where we're able to kind of talk about opportunities with our climate action plans, challenges that we face, and things like that. So it's just good information exchange. Similar to Capital Region Climate Readiness Collaborative, which is governments in that area, but also nonprofit partners and other kind of groups as well. And so kind of a different forum, but similarly, we meet less frequently, but similar information sharing on just how to approach different climate action plan strategies. Also wanted to highlight the regional air districts. They're interesting to work with because we get kind of different funding opportunities and can kind of rely on them for some technical expertise as well. But for Yolo Solano Air Quality, for example, I think they're working on developing an e-bike incentive program with Yolo County, but requesting input from City of Davis on how to implement this as well. And so I think that's something where we can form that partnership and work with them. Same with Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District. They provided some of the funds that we were able to use for our EV fleet transition. So they provided some of the funds for those 7 vehicles I mentioned before as well. So there's different kind of opportunities to work with the air districts depending on the need there. All right, so another element that I wanted to present was just opportunities for 2026 and kind of just looking ahead. Just want to highlight that this is by no means a comprehensive thing. These are just kind of 10 actionable things that I wanted to list out for kind of discussion and just be able to have on the radar. But I think everything within the CAP, especially as opportunities present themselves, is something that can be followed through on. But I think these are just 10 that I wanted to put out there as maybe potentially more actionable in the near term opportunities. The first being the CAP dashboard. So this is something that's called out within the CAP. It's not live, but I've been able to start working with the partner that was selected called CloudSight. It's a software service, and it's basically trying to create a public-facing dashboard where you can really drill down what are the projects that kind of roll up to the different actions that we're trying to accomplish and get more of a live status on that. And for the implementation update that I could provide annually would be great, but I'm sure having live information is a little bit more helpful too, and being able to have more of an ongoing resource that you can consult there. And so that would, the intention of it would be to be able to show kind of what are all the projects that are being performed by the city that roll up into the climate action plan. Spring 2026 is the goal for that, to be able to work with them. They're a pretty new company too, so we're getting everything kind of laid out there, but I think there's good potential, and what they have so far I think is going to fit the needs. Then kind of moving into the same kind of structure I had before, building energy and design being the first goal here. So the voluntary measures for the first two items there for building electrification, both when permits are needed and for existing buildings, call for a lot of education outreach for this component. And so really trying to focus on what meaningful outreach would mean for that, and how do you provide homeowners, renters, whoever be it, the resources that they need to be able to make informed decisions, property managers. There's a lot of opportunity there. I think it really needs to be fine-tuned in what are the most valuable resources for those individuals. So I think that's something that can be explored further in the coming year, especially while the voluntary measures are trying to figure out kind of what would move the needle in that capacity. Kind of building off of that is the weatherization kit pilot idea as well. So this is something that Yolo County did through the Yolo Energy Partnership, it's called, and they were distributing weatherization kits to low-income households that can focus on just kind of small things you could do. So this is something to be available to both homeowners and renters. You can do door sweeps, you can do weather stripping, you can do kind of low-flow shower heads, you can do LED lighting. So there's a variety of small things within the kits that they have found to be pretty popular, and things that can just be installed quite easily. The third action there for property managers is something that I'm trying to figure out how best could be approached, but I think maybe, working with community partners could be one approach for it, but just trying to figure out how can we address some of the split incentives that come with working with property managers for performing upgrades at their places, and what can we do, particularly under voluntary measures, to help increase energy efficiency and electrification at rental units. And so that's an idea that needs to be kind of further detailed out, but I think that is an opportunity for the city, especially given the large rental stock within the city limits. I think that that's kind of a big area that could use some more direct focus. And then looking at the seventh action item there for renewable energy in city facilities, looking for energy opportunities, whether that is kind of maybe being able to put solar panels and kind of battery storage out at the wastewater treatment plant. That's a really large energy user for the city, and so being able to kind of offset some of those costs with making that and have local energy generation, I think could be valuable. There is a lot of space there, and there's the potential that you could have, kind of larger than just would be needed for the facility itself. So there may be the opportunity for kind of feeding into the community solar energy as well, but that's something that would need to be explored further. And I mentioned previously working with energy services companies who kind of do those building audits, so I think there's the opportunity to work further with them to see kind of what opportunities we have for our different facilities here. We've really focused on just LED lighting with them in the past year, but there may be other opportunities to kind of expand that. And like I said, the model there is that they would kind of perform the building audit and then present you with those findings that you could actually kind of justify the case for it as well. So it's a little bit more informational, at least to start with those approaches. All right. Moving on to transportation and land use. So Electrify Yolo is definitely top of mind. I think that's something where we can really get, an RFP out and start building those EV stations from the funding there, and I think that'll be a big focus area. It kind of has multiple components to it. One, the RFP to come in with like a charging like costing system for people to be able to use those chargers, and just kind of all the components that go along with these publicly accessible chargers. So really working to understand, how can we get the project moving forward, and being able to get kind of the RFP issued out, I think is going to be a good near-term focus. I touched on it earlier, but the Zero Emission Vehicle Action Plan is something that I think we can continue to engage with our regional partners on, and also with the consultant there, and really try and get information that will be valuable for the community here, especially if there's remaining Electrify Yolo funds, which I call phase 2 there. But if there are remaining funds from that after this initial RFP, we could use findings from that action plan to be able to implement them in a more kind of structured manner, with community input as needed there too for the different stations, and kind of work on the strategy. But I think that that's something that can really tie in nicely for just kind of come up with a more cohesive plan for how to use those. And then continuing the implementation of the city EV fleet. So that's, like I said, focused on the light duty trucks initially, but there's obviously a larger city fleet than that. So I think just finding opportunities, whether they be funding opportunities through air districts, whether that be a new state program, things like that. I think just trying to look for ways that we can really help kind of transition the city EV fleet over is going to be something that'll be top of mind, especially kind of seeing how effective it was initially too with those 7 trucks that we've been able to use. I think 5 are in active duty right now, so being able to kind of get all the infrastructure in place to continue using those will be something valuable. And then YOLO Commute is something I touched on earlier as well, and I think has a lot of opportunity. I think there's a lot of benefits for member organizations, especially for kind of individuals who are part of that, and that's something that I think can be expanded. It meets a lot of the transportation goals. I listed here transportation demand management as one of the areas where it kind of fits in nicely, but it really fits across, first mile, last mile transportation. It fits across electric micromobility. I think even expanding, kind of strengthening regional transit and kind of finding ways that we can really plug YOLO Commute in and kind of have it be a resource for businesses, for nonprofits, for government partners here, and kind of just expand the awareness of it is something that'd be really valuable. And I think they have incentives that can help with switching away from just single car rides, even if it's a van pool and setting that up and things like that, just kind of come up with more kind of different strategies within it. Not a prioritized action within the CAP, but an additional action that City Council has had brought to them in the past there, and would give a status update. I think it's kind of April is the City Council target at the moment, is gas to electric small equipment. So small off-road equipment, I think is what CAR calls them, SOARs. And so we're talking about leaf blowers, chainsaws, things like that. And so kind of focusing on what are next steps and council direction for how we can pursue what the goals are at the time for that. So that's kind of focusing, I think leaf blowers was a big topic of conversation in the past couple of years for those. And so I think this is something that will come back and we'll figure out next steps for that as well. And then the final goal area that I have here is climate adaptation. So continuing the implementation of the Urban Forestry Management Plan. And I think kind of the role that I can play supporting the team there would be focusing on, what funding opportunities are there out there and working with the team there. And then also internal coordination, just working with, making sure that there's something front of mind whenever we approach city projects. And then also if there's any outreach that needs to perform, I think that's something that can also be kind of supported there as well. Sorry, I know I tend to talk pretty fast at times, so I'm more than happy to go through any questions that you have, clarifying questions, things like that. But that is the end of the presentation that I have. But yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sam. I think that was very informative. So we'll go to clarifying questions from the commission now, and then we'll go to public comment. So I started a roll call down there, and Jim, you have a question, so let's go right to your direction.
Yeah, I'll have comments later, but question. So I thank you, Sam. You've covered a lot of different things there, but inevitably I'll have to say I'm a little frustrated that we haven't done more. And I'll sort of illustrate. I mean, we've seen this before when we were looking at the Urban Forest Management Plan. There were heroic efforts by Tree Davis in the city, and yet we lost more trees than we planted, and so we're falling behind. I have that somewhat the same feeling here, that we have lofty ambitions and we're sort of falling behind. To what extent is the lack of further progress impeded by budget constraints and by staff turnover and staff shortages? And are those, if those are problems, are they continuing? What's the future look like in terms of budget and staffing?
Yeah, so I can start just from my understanding, and maybe you can add on too. So yeah, I joined up in September last year, so I think the previous sustainability manager left in around January, so I think staffing shortage there was a pretty demonstrable thing for not being able to move some of these as well. In terms of like budget and future outlook, I might turn to Stan to see if you have input as well. But
So, yeah, I would say the majority of what you're seeing, and I appreciate the frustration exhibited, the majority of what you're seeing in lack of movement over the past year was simply we did not have Sam on board for quite a while for the year. So I will say in the past, well, since September, give them a couple months to getting ingrained, the movement on some of these actions is definitely sped up and definitely gotten honestly toward completion for a few of the efforts that were kind of sitting out there. The dashboard should be up and live pretty quick. So there is movement ongoing now. Is it some of the fundamental large pieces? No, not yet. that relates to funding, which, as you know, the budget and the discussions we'll have with council coming in the near future are going to center around that. I will tell you, I was just at a goal-setting session with council. That's why I was a bit late. So obviously, CAP implementation and how that integrates with city services was still a priority and still will be a priority. So I don't suspect that you'll see much in the way of difference from a funding perspective of council wanting to prioritize those efforts in what we deliver in the city. So I can't speak to now, council hasn't made those decisions yet. But I will say they definitely were still focused on prioritizing the CAP and implementation of those goals in our discussion this evening. So, one last thing I will mention. Part of my role as assistant city manager is bring sustainability over within my purview. Part of that also allows Sam to leverage a lot of the public works team, environmental resources group. So we've actually enhanced the resources available for CAP and CAP implementation. So I would just like to note that as well. It's not something you're going to see in an org chart, but it's a reality that exists.
So given the budget constraints, is there thinking about moving not first on items that require a lot of budget, but items that can be implemented without budget constraints?
I think that's going to be something that we'll probably take a fresh look at. We kind of focused on what Sam put together here as what we've been able to move based on previous prioritizations. Certainly, I think looking at what we can accomplish within the constraints of what we have on hand from a resource perspective is going to be key. I'm going to look to Sam to kind of jump into that, and I think as we move into the budget cycle, we're in this going into the second year of the 2-year. But as we move into that and understanding where council's at with the funding, we'll probably have to have those discussions around, okay, what can we accomplish within the boundaries of our resources. With that said, also, he pointed out working with other groups, other regional areas, the county, other cities, to see if we can leverage some other funding. As you know, that's quite challenging at this point in time in this arena. So that may not materialize here in the near future. But that's also where we're looking for some resources.
My question is extremely pointed in comparison. You mentioned the fleet vehicles. Are those replacement vehicles or are they augmenting the fleet?
I believe they're replacement, but Sam, correct me if I'm wrong on that.
So the majority are replacement. We did have a couple vehicles that were added to the fleet in previous budget cycles, and I'm almost positive we went with electric there. The key we look at when we're going for replacements, the fleet manager works with the operational divisions, actually departments across the city. So where it fits the need, we definitely look for that electric option and per the plan. So yeah, most of them are replacements.
Great, thank you.
Sam, sorry if I missed this, but do you currently have any plans to do, or like a timeline when you're thinking about revising or updating the climate action plan?
Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't feel comfortable kind of initially moving into the role and then trying to initiate an update as soon as I started. So I think that is something that's a little bit TBD on the timeline. I think kind of also called within that is another GHG emission inventory as well. And so potentially that could be useful information that can help inform an update as well. So I think just trying to stagger the timing or think about how those would work in conjunction with each other would be something to consider. So not a timeline, but I think it's something that can have a near-term decision on how to approach it here soon. So that would be a priority for 2026, is just trying to determine how to approach both of those elements. In terms of inventory, just for your awareness, I think the last one we did was with Yolo County and regional partners. I think we did in 2020 for a 2016 baseline. And had kind of polled some of the members to see if they had any interest in doing it this year. It sounds like it's not in their forecast to do in 2026. They plan to do it maybe 2027 and revisit it. So it could be the option of either waiting and going with a regional approach like we did last time, or trying to do it sooner on our own if that's more of a priority. So that's just some factors to consider there as well. Yeah, so hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does, thank you. That's all for me.
Hi Sam, thanks for the presentation. I'm wondering if you're presenting this or some form of this presentation for any other commissions, such as the Transportation Commission?
No, we don't currently have plans to. I don't know if that's something that's been passed, but no, it's not currently on the radar.
Yeah, Sam, thank you very much. This was very informative. I appreciate the sort of summary of the survey. So I'm going to get even more into the weeds. How many vehicles does the city have? Because I'm a sort of numbers person, and what is the metric of, you know, as Stan said, there's certain vehicles where it's appropriate to electrify. So can you answer that?
Don't have a figure offhand, which is why I was trying to look over to Stan there. I don't know if you have a rough idea.
I'll see if I can look it up real quick. I may be able to find it, but I will say the challenge we've had there is, you know, a lot of our inventory is heavy equipment, which has lagged a little bit. I will note though that there are a number of heavy pieces of equipment that are now coming out that are electrified. I'll actually be looking at some of those inventories here soon. Fleet manager's already looked at those. So again, when we have a replacement come due, part of that assessment is there an electric vehicle that will fit the need and operate effectively with the electric mode. So, the progression's been a little limited. It's been, you know, the light duty, medium duty trucks that have been most readily available and that we got a little bit of funding for. But we're moving in. But it's been a bit of a slow roll just because a lot of our fleet is heavy.
I'm gonna, from Ann's question that's very in the weeds, I'm gonna zoom out a little bit, and I'm curious, Sam, in your role as, you know, coming on in September and coming into a fully, you know, adopted CAP, what was the process like for you within the city, working with city staff to compile this report and kind of get updates on all these things? How did that, is that something that you feel is being prioritized kind of within the different arenas, or how's that been going?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I would say everyone is definitely supportive and trying to do what they can to help. So I would reach out, you know, to the transportation team and meet with them and kind of go over like, here's what I see that we're doing, and can you help me fill in the gaps, or are there things that I'm missing? So that was definitely approached as we were building with the transportation teams. I think moving forward, it's definitely helpful to have kind of like myself in more of a project manager role too, because they have a lot of things that they're trying to accomplish within their own teams and departments. And I think having someone who can help kind of work across the different teams there is going to be something that's valuable and move some of these forward. So I think, yeah, I think I kind of see myself as being kind of a connective tissue to be able to link the CAP to a lot of the actions that they're trying to do within their own teams. And so I think going forward, that's something that will definitely be a high focus point. But that's, yeah, that's kind of the way I approach it, was just trying to meet with them, understand, you know, here's what I see, what do you see, and then just trying to meld all that together into this report. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration moving forward.
Awesome, thank you. And then regarding the dashboard specifically, so in my experience, dashboards can be really fantastic, and they can also be really challenging to upkeep. And so what is because obviously there's one thing to have the public facing, you know, user interface that can be reviewed and looked at, you know, and all of that, but do you have a sense of what the process is going to look like right now to keep that data current, or kind of what the update cycle will look like, so that, you know, if I go and look at it in June, is it going to look like it did in February, or is it going to look different?
Yeah, that's a fair one. It can definitely be an iterative approach too, to figure out like what works best for kind of how that would roll out, whether that's be like a last updated date on something. But I would imagine it's not something that's being updated daily or even weekly, monthly. It could even be something that's quarterly potentially, and just kind of being able to kind of roll up all those updates and put them out. That being said, there might not be a quarterly update for each of these actions. And so I think that's where maybe just being able to mark, like if there were no updates within a time frame, have that kind of be something clear. The way I see it is there will be kind of a small update section within each project where you can kind of get into that information. But yeah, I think it'll be slightly iterative and get feedback on how it's viewed would be one approach for it.
Awesome, thank you. Do we have any other clarifying questions that have come up? All right, seeing none, we are going to go to public comment on this item. As a reminder for the audience, we're going to limit public comment to 3 minutes per speaker, and please request that everybody stay focused on the specific agenda item. So welcome public comment, and Sam, I'm going to ask you to help me with the timekeeping, please.
Sounds good.
I want to share this with everyone. My name is Yin Wan. I am the granddaughter of lost Chinese empire, and I'm the legal owner for Yin Wan. So it's a huge fund to support the city of Davis and UC Davis and many operation in California. So I have a question about this. I want to ask a question to Sam. So I want to know, do you know the vacancy rate in the city of Davis? Because we're talking about big development, and you mentioned the project for the North Davis, cannery, and so I want to know, when the city, when you are talking about, transportation related to human, or really, do you happen to know the vacancy rate in Davis? And the second, I want to know is if the population, because after the pandemic, I know we lost a lot of people. Will that depopulation actually affect the city's development? Because when we talk here, it's urban forestry management. I kind of feel Davis is still suburban. We don't have huge like commercial or anything like that. You don't have to answer now. If you can bring it back next meeting, that would be great. I want to share a little bit about our community. I'm a Chinese dissident. I noticed, there's a Confucius Institute started with a C and I. The Chinese woman they openly call themselves CIA. I was fooled by them. I thought like American CIA, but they're not. I want to make everybody aware. And I was arrested when I went to Morocco. I'm a 18 years service retired of UC Davis. I served as I was IT manager for the Institute of Transportation Studies, and they just arrested me for no reason. I don't think that they are American government. I believe that all Chinese Communist Party police station in Davis, the specifics attack the Chinese people. So I want to make I'm talking to the city council meeting, but this is the first meeting. I want to make people aware of that. And then I want to share, AI, government's role. I talked with AI, and AI told me, the robots shall not pretending to be any specific person. The reason I mention this is I believe the Confucius Institute agents, they're not even human. The technology is there. It looks like a woman, but they're like fembots. Okay, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Richard McCann. I'm a former NRC and Utilities Commission member, and also was on the Downtown Plan Sustainability, and also a consultant to Yolo County on their climate action. And I have read the review with interest of the program to date, and I have a few comments. I also sent an email with comments as well, which have a lot more details. So one thing is that it was a little hard to figure out what status of what items actually fit with the climate action plan, because it wasn't a correspondence, but I hope that when we have the dashboard up, that will fix the issue. But I also noted that, for example, the parking lot shade ordinance is actually not in the climate action plan, which we had pushed to put it into the plan, but it wasn't adopted, and now it's listed as being part of the climate action plan. So there needs to be something about formally adopting that into the climate action plan. I think that's an important step. I read the section about electrification permits that have happened so far. The plan at the last moment was those two measures were changed from mandatory to voluntary because of some community opposition. But it also, as part of doing that, the city council adopted a resolution to revisit this within 2 years, and if there wasn't sufficient progress, to move towards a mandatory ordinance. 100 houses doing permit for conversion out of what is probably 1,000 permits during a year is not sufficient progress. And so we need to move on from voluntary to mandatory for those measures, and making accommodations for hardships. for people who have difficulty for various reasons for not being able to electrify. But more than 3/4 of the houses in Davis are ready to electrify because of when they were built and what the building standards were. We also need to pursue better land use planning. We abdicated our responsibility for doing that in the village farms development because the draft alternative 4 of the draft EIR would have much lower GHG emissions than what was actually done in the proposal. There's an opportunity with Willow Grove to adopt alternative 3, which would result in lower GHG emissions. We need to push for concluding those things that are consistent with the cap. What was done with village farms is not consistent with the cap. We also need to get ready for e-bikes. Those are coming. They're going to, that's going to be the heart of our active transportation. In a decade, hopefully it'll be a lot more e-bikes and a lot fewer cars for doing local trips. So that's what we really need to push for. We missed an opportunity on installing microgrids and creating a new municipal utility. The city was part of a grant application to do a study for doing either Village Farms or Willow Grove, and the city did not follow through on that. And we missed the opportunity to save tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars. And so last thing is work with Yolo County on soil sequestration. Give them the 5,000 acres to manage for soil sequestration, and that will, I think, you'll accomplish a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Chris Granger. I'm the executive director with Cool Davis, and I just want to say it's so great to have Sam on board. You know, a real person to work with, and he's like on this huge learning curve, but doing an awesome job. So we're looking forward to more work with the city and to help with this process as we start to kind of elevate really specific things moving forward. We submitted a report, and so we're here to answer any questions that you might have for us on that. We also participate in the Resilience Collaborative that Sam mentioned, and we're really excited about how that is moving forward, a broad coalition of organizations, hopefully, that will be working together on implementation of the climate action goals, both the county goals and other jurisdictions. So I just want to thank you two for your commitment to the work of climate action and environmental justice as we move forward. Some key takeaways related to the dashboard and sort of the presentation of outcomes. It's so important to be able to track goals for specific outcomes, and some of the 28 actions don't yet have measurable goals laid out, and so I think that's something for the commission to pay attention to. Overall, electric and natural gas usage is available regularly from PG&E that the city could be reporting here and could contain in a dashboard even without the GHG emission inventory done. The state of California also provides data on EV adoption that you can get right down to zip code level, and solar installations right down to city level. So all of that could be available in the dashboard right away. On electrification of buildings, Cool Davis is working on ways to help the city track both the relationship to our work and actual households, moving forward. And we think we're pretty close to being able to create a mechanism for classification of households and where they are in their progress to electrification, so it'll be easier for the city to report that out to you in the future. This will be our best ever year for adoption of electrification because the federal tax credits were in place. There's a lot of emphasis and education going on in the community, and the outcomes, while the best ever, that's the last time we're going to have that without those federal tax credits in place. And so the question about requirements versus voluntary program is real. If we want to do this rapidly and meet our goals, 2044 goals, we're probably going to have to look at requirements. We'd all love it if the state would just requirement and not have to have a battle here in our local community. The state's not going to require any new code until 2032, so we need to look at that as a community.
We're at 3 minutes here, Chris.
Thank you so much. I submitted some other comments about future goals, and Sam has those. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, any other members of the public wishing to comment on this item? Seeing none, let's take it back to the commission and open it up for discussion. I've started with Jim a couple times, so I'm going to throw it over to Ann to start us off here.
I was really impressed to read and hear about all the collaboration, because I think that that's going to be the key to having accomplishments, and also as we see the potential of Prop 4 money and being able to build collaborations and cooperations to secure some additional funds, because I think we're all frustrated by the pace at which things have moved forward, but money is at the heart of much of that. And as we can find other resources and work with, regional partners, I think that will be in our interest. So I really like seeing all the mention of partnerships that are underway already. So I think that would be my first comment to make.
Jacob?
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a bunch of thoughts here, so I'll try not to ramble through them too much. I'm glad a couple commenters touched on the building electrification piece. We had a really, as part of the Natural Resource Commission, we had a really robust kind of community engagement process around that particular issue, especially kind of real estate interests in the city had a great perspective about how that was going to impact their work, impact affordability. I think we now have I think interest will continue on that issue, and this commission is a great place to continue to bring all sides of that issue in, so that we can kind of, rather than making some kind of last minute changes to the climate action plan, which sort of happened last time, and setting up changing from mandatory to voluntary, we can really approach it in a little bit more of a stepwise fashion and make sure folks have enough time to give their input, and we can kind of really understand the implications of switching from voluntary to mandatory or vice versa. Really appreciate, Chris, your perspective, one of the commentaries' perspectives on kind of the data availability too here. I think that's one big thing that I guess is crystallized for me since we were talking about the draft of the climate action plan to now. A lot of this data has just become so much more available, whether it's like our own data that we're seeing in other presentations to this commission, like Aquahawk, or we're talking about solid waste from other folks. I think it's where, as we think about revising the cap, once we do get there, and putting out this the dashboard, I think thinking about how we can use that data, that ridership data that you were sharing, or the biking data that you were sharing, how can we make that a little bit more digestible and inform some of those revisions in that dashboard? To me, seems like a really great opportunity, as well as really challenging. I'll also echo another point of public comment too. The rise of e-bikes, I think that was just kind of starting as we were drafting the climate action plan, and it's just exploded. And so I'm really excited to see how we can further implement that into the climate action plan in the future. A few times we've touched on charging infrastructure for electric vehicles as well as city fleets. The Natural Resource Commission had a handful of opportunities to both kind of inform the location of some of these publicly available charging infrastructure and inform some of the city's priorities with regard to vehicle electrification. Those conversations were incredibly informative for us. It was really empowering for that commission as well, being able to really see our advice be kind of taken into consideration, giving the public an opportunity to kind of tell us and tell the city sort of where their priorities were for this electrification infrastructure. If you all are moving into an implementation phase 2 for the Electrify Yellow, I encourage you to do the same thing and consider if you have extra funds, if you have flexibility, if you want to set a course for the future, please bring us all in, especially, that was just as a Natural Resource Commission, but even during those discussions, environmental justice was really centered in a lot of those. We saw a lot of opportunity for bringing those, the public funding for electric vehicle charging to the rental space and making it available to renters, even if it's not within existing rental developments, it's placing it in places where it's visible and renters can get to it and still utilize it. And I think the city's done a pretty good job of that. You know, thinking about like the placement of chargers at the library, for instance, near I-80. I think a lot of what we talked about during the NRC is evident in the actual work that's been done. I really appreciated you spotlighting the Yellow Commute program. So I work in Sacramento, and through my work am part of the NorCal Go Transportation Management Agency, which was formerly known as something else, which was in addition to another transportation management agency. But what you're seeing is this coalescing of, hey, we're all working towards the same thing. We all want to incentivize the same thing, and really like learning from each other and kind of coalescing. For the Yellow Commute, again, you know, I see links between that Yellow Commute, the e-bike adaptation, the ridership data that you were providing, and uniting that with the great transit infrastructure that we have now. Something that's really made a difference for folks that I know that are involved in NorCal Go are things like guaranteed ride home or subsidies for bus passes. Combining that with having to pay for parking in Sacramento or having to pay for parking on campus does really appreciably move the needle for people, including myself, which is why I'm always late, because Yellow Bus is always late. It's not as on time as Unitrans, and I apologize for now rambling, even though I made you all wait. The last thing I wanted to add was just, Ann, your comment about regional collaboration. As a state worker, someone who works on grants and reviews grant applications, seeing those regional collaborations on grants does make a difference when grant managers and folks are awarding points and awarding grant funds. Other things that make that really do move the needle too are bringing to commissions like this. If you're doing project prioritization, being able to say, look, we talked about it at a regional level, we also brought it to our commissions on a city level, and they help us prioritize. That is the difference between an application getting full credit and an application, you know, getting 7, 5, you know, half credit, whatever it happens to be. So I really applaud you all for taking that on. And Sam, I'm just really excited that you've articulated here kind of your own vision for what you think is really working, areas for improvement. I'm really excited to see where you take this CAP in its current iteration and as we move forward. Thanks for letting me ramble on there.
Thank you, Jacob.
One of the things that I thought would actually be super helpful, and I don't remember, I apologize, which commissioner mentioned or asked about it in the clarifying question section, but you mentioned that we were currently the only commission that you were intending or was currently scheduled to present this presentation to. And along with your comments of how the webbing among the city departments, if we could present it to at least a handful of the other commissions that do have direct impacts on some of the CAP segments, I think this would be a really helpful presentation for them as well, to make sure that the CAP is always forefront in their minds as decisions are being made and suggestions are being given, so that they're looking at that as well. And then just one other comment, just because you asked for it at the end of your presentation, which was ways that we could possibly just look at the data differently. It actually echoes some of the comments from the public as well. When presenting numbers, if we could get it as a percentage of overall to really see how that implementation is driving throughout the community. Things like, I know some of the commenters mentioned the permitting, but I also thought the Aquahawk adoption would be really interesting. Those numbers, you know, look good, almost 10,000, but like what percentage of the customer base is that, and are we seeing those numbers for? And then tie into that the future home energy pilot, the future plans of that, and what's that looking like towards the future, because you saw the high interest in the pilot program, and you know what are the plans for moving that forward as well.
So the program evaluation literature makes a broad distinction between program evaluation and impact evaluation. And your report seems to correspond almost entirely to program evaluation of planning, outreach, what activities are you doing, and very little on what impact that actually has. And Jacob and others have talked about the need for data and so on. Certainly one area it has to do with gas to electric conversion, where you just mentioned how many permits there have been, but as various people have mentioned, you don't know what's happening in that conversion. I mean, is it the whole house? Is it just the oven? Is it just this or that? And what's the impact? I think it was Richard at one point that has mentioned that the greenhouse gas inventory hasn't been updated for 10 years. And it would seem to be an appropriate action to actually try and measure what's happening to greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, are we having an impact, or are we falling behind, or what? So I think some more focus on what's actually being accomplished rather than what's being attempted would be good. And this isn't to denigrate what you have been talked about. I mean, we need the planning and so on. That's all necessary, but it's not sufficient. In terms of actual accomplishments and so on, a lot of what you're doing and Cool Davis is doing is outreach and education. And again, that's absolutely essential, but there's research in the United States and a number of other countries which indicate that populations generally know about climate change. They know what has to be done, but they don't do it. And so we need to try and set up incentives and to make it easier for them to do things rather than just to be educated. I mean, the education is necessary. I mean, I've been involved with that. But that's, again, not sufficient. So, for example, in the building, the gas to electric conversion, city council made that voluntary, and it's clear that a few people are volunteering, but not very many doing very much. A lot of the criticisms and opposition focused on a few specific things. People who had underground lines and the expense and so on. I would think that it would be possible for city council to make conversion mandatory under certain limited circumstances, giving exceptions for those cases where it's especially difficult or costly, but still making conversion mandatory for a substantial group of homes. The voluntary isn't working so well. And there's a lot of social science research where that doesn't always work. Well, I won't go into the academics. I mean, another place where it could be made easier is to actually start installing EV chargers. I think the planning has been going on for 6 years now, something like that. And it seems like certain locations are so obvious that no matter what the plan is going to be, they're going to be included, so we could go ahead and install them even if the plan isn't completed. And I think, like the library is an example, but there are other locations, so we could go ahead and actually try and make EV charging more accessible, and maybe that would encourage more people to get, EV cars. So I'm hoping that we can try and focus on some things like that would make action, implementation actually accomplish something rather than just the planning. I'll leave it there for a moment.
Thank you, Jim. In general, I guess this is maybe the one of the downsides of being the chair. You guys all made several points that I would just like to echo. I agree, aggregate data and kind of looking at individual data points in the context of the whole, right, in terms of building permits, in terms of fleet management, all of those things I think would be really helpful. And, you know, for me in particular, the CAP has been on my mind quite a bit as we've kind of gone through this evolution as a commission, you know, obviously the merging of NRC and Tree Commission, and kind of how we, you know, forefront this and kind of keep it at front of mind as we go through the work that we do month to month and throughout the year. And so that is kind of where my mind went on a lot of these things, and I think there's some suggestions I would have that are almost more structural in how we engage with the CAP, in addition to, you know, obviously good discussion on the specific actions and things we need to be doing on the ground and in project implementation and planning. But I'd be really interested in seeing with this commission, within our staff reports, a specific section that says, how does this align with the CAP, or how does this impact the CAP? I've seen that for, you know, city council reports to say, hey, where does this go? Where does this fit in our strategic plan as a city? I think if we kept that in each of our staff reports within our agenda items, that would be really helpful for keeping us, you know, with that at the forefront. I'd also be interested, there's a lot to chew on in the CAP, right? It covers a lot of different sort of policy areas, it covers a lot of different topics. I'm curious about breaking this up into, not to make more work for you, Sam, but breaking this up a little bit. And the thing that came to my mind to your point, I think, Sarah, of is any other commission getting this presentation? I mean, I think we're all aware, even with the data being, you know, 10 years old, 74% of GHG emissions in the city in our last inventory were from on-road transportation, and that's very much aligned with the Transportation Commission. So I'd be interested in maybe a dual meeting, I think that was suggested by maybe Chris in her comment, where we meet with transportation and focus specifically on transportation topics related to the CAP at some point, and then maybe have the other ones come to this commission and maybe we segment them that way. I think that would be an interesting way to look at things. Another couple items that came to my mind is, you know, I saw a couple notes on here that, hey, we've seen this program work regionally and we want to do a pilot of it in Davis. I'd be really encouraging staff that if we have a regional model that looks good, like the weatherization kit program, consider diving into that more thoroughly than a pilot program, right? And making that a little more widespread and right off the bat. I know from a funding perspective, sometimes it's easier to get a pilot program funded and have data to go back for a full program, but if we have something in the region that says, hey, this works here, I think that gives us an opportunity. And then kind of along just a broader sense is, I saw somebody, or I think Jesse, you might have mentioned, you know, objectives and goals related to these items that we have in the CAP. And I think they're formulated that way, but how they aren't formulated is kind of as SMART goals. And I think that's something this commission could be looking at too, is putting more measurables on some of these, or helping you think through that, Sam. And that brings me to kind of one other thing that I'd like us as a commission to think about a little bit on this item, which is, and this is, you know, kind of a discussion, but are there any subcommittees that we want to consider to look at any particular items, or places that you might need help digging into some of these things, Sam, where we could, you know, break off and then kind of do a smaller group that could help research that and dig into it and bring it back to the full commission? Because I think that's a place where, because this document is so wide and you know, far-ranging and covers a lot of ground, we might be able to do a little bit of work to dive in specific areas and provide some deeper and more, you know, substantial input in particular topics. So that was a little bit of a ramble from my perspective as well, but those are all things that kind of came to mind throughout our discussion and the presentation. And again, thank you, Sam, for putting this all together. And I'd imagine this felt like a crash course in everything we're doing in the city of Davis, even beyond your onboarding. So I think you did a really great job synthesizing everything, especially being relatively new to the city still. So thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah, great onboarding is to do this, so it was good.
I actually just wanted to jump in and say, I think the SMART goals are a really good point and actually would really support the dashboard implementation of really helpful measurements to implement into the dashboard, and would touch on our goals over here of actually seeing the impact of the program implementation as well. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I would just concur with that. I think seeing more metrics and seeing progress and, you know, what the impact is would really be meaningful to us and to the community as a whole.
So, to some extent, in some cases, that raises a question in my mind. Some of these things give feedback, like Aquahawks. Well, maybe that's a bad example, where the homeowner gets feedback and knows what impact, but it's not clear to me whether that can be aggregated to the city level so we get a sense of how the city is doing.
It can be, to an extent, depends on the information you're talking about. Certainly, it would be washed, so there would be no personal information associated with it, but aggregate might be possible in certain aspects. I would, related to the Transportation Commission, I would note that in your enabling resolution, CAP implementation is your focus, excluding transportation, which is then part of the Transportation Commission. So just want to note that. I know there's always some discussion around that, and that was formed, but if we wanted to dive into that too much, I think that would be a preparation for council to talk about. Just FYI.
No, I think that's a really good point, Stan, and I appreciate you getting back to the authorizing resolution, because I understand the thought process that went into that, and then kind of keeping lanes clear. I guess that's a transportation analogy in this case, so there we go. Yeah, that's off topic. But I do feel like I don't want to say hamstrung, because I think there's a lot of good things we can talk about and think about here, but I do think if we can't be thinking about transportation in this context, it really limits the creativity that we can bring to the conversation. So that's why and maybe that's a motion we make for council to requestly consider, having us do a dual meeting or something once a year to talk about.
Sure. Yeah, and I certainly respect that understanding. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I just think based on how it was formed, I think it'd be maybe next week a subcommittee forming, in essence, a request for council to consider this, and we put it through the normal process with council now, and then they could provide direction.
Well, I for one think now is a good time to test out that process of putting something in front of the council. I think it makes sense that because it is such a big part of the CAP, because the CAP is, now that Sam's on staff, I think we're gonna start seeing a lot more interest and activity for the CAP. I think it's a good time to start that ball rolling and see how long it takes to get downhill. So I think, I don't know if we would need to do like a resolution or a request.
How about if it's okay with you, we can put it on next month's agenda to kind of chat through that. We'll reacquaint you with the process, and we can walk right through it then and come to it. That work?
That sounds great to me.
Well, we just did long range now, so.
We also can't do that, yeah. Can't talk about transportation, can't talk about, we gotta really stick really close.
Any other comments or thoughts from the commission on this item? All right, seeing none, thank you again to staff for the presentation and the public for the comments, and we can close that item and move on to our next agenda item. We've got some time before 8 o'clock yet, so I don't have to get to the rest of my script if we're running along. This next item is designation of a vice chair for this commission. So I will turn it over to Sam again for an informational presentation, and then we'll take it back for clarifying questions and public comment and all those fun things.
Yeah, thank you. So this will be similar to last month where you selected Jordan as chair. So this will be selecting the vice chair. You've deferred, I think this month, you have a greater attendance, but same idea, yeah, you can deliberate amongst yourselves and kind of decide who would want to be vice chair. And happy to answer any questions if you have them on the process.
Yeah, do we have any clarifying questions for Sam? Short but sweet presentation. Do we have any public comment on the designation of our vice chair? All right, seeing none. Open to the group here. What do we think? I have a thought. I see Jesse's already bowing out.
That's fun.
I think I remember in the discussion last time that we might have a candidate and that Jacob might step into that role. Is that possible?
I think it would be possible if no one else wants to take that. Sarah was also interested. That might be something that you're interested in.
Thank you. I'm concerned that I have this occasional conflict with my Monday night orchestra rehearsals, and so I'm feeling like I'm going to pause that thought for a future date, perhaps.
I would accept a nomination in this case, I guess. Knowing that I'll have occasional conflicts as well, but I'm sure Jordan will. Yeah, so yeah, if it was so moved, I would be up for that.
Well, hearing that, I would like to make a motion that Jacob be considered as the candidate for the vice chair.
I second.
We have a motion and a second, so let's, and if there's no more discussion, we can take it to a vote. All in favor of Jacob becoming the vice chair for this iteration of the Climate and Environmental Justice Committee, say aye.
Aye.
Appears we have 5 and 1 abstain. Congratulations.
Yeah, should I have gone to another room so I didn't?
I voted for myself as chair, so I can't really tell you what to do. All right, congratulations, Jacob. I'm glad to have some support from an accomplished chair of this commission, so looking forward to working with you on it.
Thank you all, appreciate it.
All right, and so that closes that item and brings us to our long-range calendar. Sam, do you have anything for us on the long-range calendar before we open it to public comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to note, I think we pushed the IPM report and policy updates to June on there, and then we added the Greener Davis outreach presentation. I think we discussed at the previous meeting, and then added the environmental recognition awards to the April calendar as well, so that we can discussing how to restart the process for those again. Those should be the changes from when you last saw this.
Thank you, Sam. So I will open up public comment if you're here for the long-range calendar, if we have one.
And then obviously for March, we'll add in the item we just discussed as well.
Thank you, Sam.
Make a suggestion that maybe you think about some kind of report on the home energy school pilot. Might be interesting for late spring quarter, because at that point we may know about the launch of the state program, and we'll also have more results and storytelling from this experience.
Thank you, Chris. All right, seeing no more public comment, we'll take it to the commission for discussion. As mentioned, we'll have the subcommittee or the conversation about taking something to council regarding maybe a co-meeting of the Transportation and Climate Commission regarding the CAP. But yeah, anything else on the long-range calendar?
Just a reminder that I will not be in attendance next month.
I'll just echo, I think that getting a more in-depth update on that pilot program would be, I think, really informative for us as we think about that building electrification taking it forward. That would be a great place for us to start. So if we can, I see May looking pretty open, although the date is still TBD, if that seems like that could be the appropriate date.
That's it, because it's a holiday. So if we have May, we'd have to move the date, which can be challenging. But yeah, I think when we're with Sam and Chris, when they look at what makes sense, then yeah, we can definitely get that on. I think that's some good information for the commission.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd be interested in seeing that as well. And I'd imagine we might have time, even with the IPM stuff in June, if we need to push it there, I'd imagine we could fit both of those things, or all 3 of those in.
Yeah, I think June may have potential. I think we tried to look at some alternative dates for May. We can check again just to see what that might be, but that one was a little challenging just based on venues that are available then. But yeah, I can definitely have it on the radar and add it to June tentatively.
All right, any more long-range calendar thoughts or comments? Okay, seeing none, we can close that item, and can I get a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
Second.
Yeah, motion and a second, all in favor? All right, I just wanted to move to adjourn, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jordan.
Well, good.
No,